So Canadian voters are high on the Trudeau Liberals right now. I got to show you this. I understand the support. Like, I understand from the way that the media has been covering this, why the support has increased like this while other parties, mainly the NDP, have stayed flat. But here is a recent poll from Abacus Data. Liberals at 38%, plus 5. Conservatives down 4, which they should be. I do agree with this, at 30%. NDP staying still at 16%. Then the Bloc at 8, and the Green Party at 6. Here's the issue. Actually, let me reference Piper here, lefty_mind, who pointed this out. This is what manufacturing consent looks like, people. The NDP have been responsible for about 4 of the most important portions of the past 2 bills. 75% wage subsidy, $2,000 benefit, etc. And the media has chosen to completely ignore the NDP's role in them. So this is exactly right. The NDP have been integral to where the Liberals have moved on these positions. The NDP were fighting for a $2,000 a month universal basic income. Now, that isn't what the Liberals delivered, but clearly it's obvious they were influenced by what the NDP were fighting for. And there was very little media coverage that the NDP were the ones fighting for that, and that the NDP were the ones putting the pressure on the Liberal government to enact that sort of policy. There was almost no media coverage about that. So what ends up happening is, of course, people see Trudeau running the country. He's doing it. Oh, I love the Liberals so much, whereas the NDP haven't moved at all. Now, look, if the support for the Liberals increased at the same rate as the NDP, I'd be fine with that. It would make total sense because, of course, you got to give the Liberals credit for actually introducing and implementing these policies, of course. But you also have to give the NDP credit for being the ones leading the charge on what to actually do here. So to see no gain at all for the NDP is really depressing. More from Piper here. I find it quite amusing that the Canadian mainstream media is now talking about universal basic income and the prevention of bailouts to companies invested in tax havens, as they have become popular, but are completely failing to mention the NDP role in both of them. So this is an issue, our story I covered recently when it comes to tax havens. I just covered it during this live stream. This is the NDP's idea, to exclude these companies. And again, when it comes to actual coverage in this Star piece, they didn't mention the NDP at all in terms of them being the voice calling for this. Jagmeet Singh, here's another example of what's been going on. Actually, let me just show you the clip.
The reality is far too many Canadians are falling through the cracks. In particular, students. Summer jobs have disappeared, on-campus jobs have disappeared, and they do not qualify for the CERB. Students are just one of many examples of people who are falling through the cracks because of their criteria. So will the Prime Minister announce today that the CERB is universal, that anyone who needs access to help now can get that help? Will the Prime Minister just do that today? The reality...
So, Jagmeet Singh here, the NDP leader, fighting to help students, calling on Trudeau and the Liberals to help students. Well, what happened shortly after? Althea Raj here of HuffPost. Trudeau says the government is going to move forward with more motions to help students in particular. Eventually announcing this: Canada Emergency Student Benefit, what students need to know. The CESB will give $12.50 a month to students impacted by COVID-19. So not the $2,000 a month that everyone else is getting, but $12.50 a month. It's not enough. The idea that Liberals think that students have less to worry about, that things are cheaper, that rent is cheaper for students, that there aren't student loans to worry about. Now, student loans have been, I believe, at least in Ontario, put on hold for 6 months, but they're going to continue. Students are sitting under mountains of debt. To act like students only need $12.50 when everybody else needs $2,000 is honestly, it's offensive. Luckily, I'm no longer a student, so this doesn't impact me regardless. But as somebody who was a student for quite a while, it's offensive to think that students don't need that money. And really, I got to say, this likely comes from Trudeau's perspective on life in general. As somebody Trudeau raised in a very privileged family, his father, again, former prime minister, he maybe views students a little differently than what the actual experiences are of real students, where maybe Trudeau was able to have his education paid for. Maybe he was able to get bailed out by his parents when he was low on cash. But when it comes to many students, millions of students, they don't have those luxuries. So this $12.50, sure, it's helping. It's not enough. But again, the larger point here being that they responded to the pressure put on them by the NDP. And again, very little credit given to the NDP in the media when it comes to how much of an impact they've had during this entire pandemic and the response of the Liberals.